In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is how the Bible begins in Genesis 1:1. Some translations says heaven in singular form, but the original Hebrew text, it is plural, heavens. The Bible tells us that there are at least three kinds of heavens: the atmosphere, the universe, and the spiritual realm. However, the following verses don't sound like how we're accustomed to understanding the beginning of the creation of the universe. But if we open our hearts and study the Bible carefully, we'll understand what it really says. First, verse 1 says that God created the heavens and then the earth. But verse 2 says that the earth already existed, covered with water. And the following verses make it sound as if creation began with the earth and then the sun, moon, and stars appeared. But if you look more closely at these verses, they don't say that God created them, but that He made them. Zechariah chapter 12 verse 1 says, "The word of the Lord concerning Israel, the Lord who stretched out the heavens, who laid the foundations of the earth, and who formed the spirit of man within him, says, This is the word of the Lord concerning Israel." This verse agrees with Genesis 1:1, which says that God first created the heavens and then the earth. Job 38 verse 7 says, "When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy." This tells us how beautiful and wondrous God's creation was, that the angels sang and shouted for joy. But Genesis 1:2 says, "Now the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." And this verse does not show such joy and the glorious beauty of creation. Rather, it sounds as if all were destroyed, because the words "without form and void" were used in the Old Testament to describe God's judgment. So what really happened? In the original Hebrew text, the word "and," va, appears at the beginning of verse 2. But this important word is omitted in many translations. This word means "and," but it can also mean "but." Isaiah 14:12-15 says, "How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the earth, you who trampled upon the nations! For you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. But you have been brought down to Hades, to the depths of the pit." These verses help us understand how the devil rebelled against God, fell, and was judged. As a result of this rebellion, all of God's creation was also judged. If verse 2 speaks of creation, it should not mention land or water, but it does say that waters covered the entire earth. Therefore, we can understand that the following verses speak of restoration, not creation. In fact, beginning with verse 3, every verse says not God created, but God made, or things came into being. The Bible clearly distinguishes between the words create, bara, and make, asa. The Hebrew word haya, which is translated as is or was, can also be translated as became or made. After verse 1, many verses use the same word as became. Chapter 2, verse 7 says, "Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul," where became is haya. Before the breath of life entered his nostrils, he was not a living soul, but afterward he became one. Thus, we can understand that this word first used in verse 2 meant became, not was. God's beautiful creation became formless and void. When the devil fell, he also rebelled against God along with 1/3 of the angels, as well as some living creatures on earth at that time. These beings later became the demons, or daimon, mentioned in the Bible. These beings lost their bodies. They are often confused with ghosts as spiritual beings that people become after death. People do not become ghosts. This is an absolute lie of these demons. After the great flood, God says, "And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the waters become a flood to destroy all flesh." This sounds like God had already done this before Genesis 1:2. Genesis 2 verse 4 says, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth, when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." Creation begins with the heavens, then the earth, and making, or restoration, begins with the earth, then the heavens, as in Genesis 1:3-27. People with humble hearts can learn about creation from the Bible.